Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
And so I wish I would have been quicker, more compassionate, empathetic, better listener, more curious. Though I was thinking about my kids, don't get me wrong. I wasn't like I wasn't paying attention to them. The reality is I could have done more, I think, to help them feel seen and heard and understood.
Hey friends, you are listening to the AllMomDoes podcast, part of the Purposely Podcast Network. Our whole goal, the thing that is the heartbeat, is for us to come alongside you exactly where you're living with the life circumstances, the kids, the job, the marriage, your faith journey, all of it. And today, I am so excited. I'm thinking back through the whole catalog of episodes that we have, which now span almost 10 seasons. We're getting ready to roll into season 10 here in just a few more clicks. And I think, wow, this is a topic that is so important and we have not talked about a whole lot. So I am really excited to unpack this today. I want to introduce you to my guest. This is Inés Franklin. Inés, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Well, thank you, Julie. I'm very excited to be with you here. And I love the heart that you have for mothers. I've been listening to your podcast and I think it's beautiful. You've encouraged me as a mom.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I so appreciate that. Well, I want the listener to get to know you a little bit better. So tell us where you're living, what the family looks like, cats, dogs, whatever you got. Just fill us in on all the behind the scenes.
Absolutely. So I'm in Southern California, near Irvine area. And my husband and I have a blended family with 5 children. I came with a son and 2 daughters, and he came with 2 daughters. They're the older ones. And so 5 kids, all of them married, and we have 10 grandchildren with 2 more on the way. In fact, in a couple months, we're going to have a dozen grandkids, which I can't believe. That's going to be crazy. And 2 of them are being born within a week apart. So I don't even know how I'm going to do this.
That's amazing.
I don't have any cats. Our last dog, Noelle, passed away last year, and I've decided that I can't take it anymore. I've lost 5 dogs in my lifetime and I just can't do it.
Girl,
So,
I know.
No pets right now.
I feel you. I lost my little dog, Katie, who listeners may remember. She was always right at my feet. And sometimes you'd hear her little tags jingle and our sound editor was always having it. And I know exactly what you're talking about. At some point if it wouldn't be too sad, I want to do an episode on dealing with pet transitions like that because I was not prepared for what a significant shift that was in our family life, how it impacted the kids. Not that we hadn't had some other pets before who shuffled off the mortal coil, but that one really hit. So I totally understand.
Yeah.
Well, this is actually really germane, a little bit tangential, but actually germane to what we are going to chat about today, which you mentioned it as you were introducing yourself. Blended families and what that looks like. You know, we have so many families today who are walking with God and for whom family is a real priority, and the makeup of their family doesn't always fit some of the things that we like to pretend like are very normal or whatever we want to say with that.
The term.
Whatever that term would be. We know that many families grapple with this. We see so many families in Scripture that were blended families, particularly some of those Old Testament cats, who sometimes had a couple wives and a couple concubines and a whole lot of kids and all kinds of things and all.
Jesus, right? He had brothers.
Exactly. So, yes, exactly. And so it's funny, Inez, because sometimes we act like this is something that is the outlier when often, at least with many families in Scripture, this is exactly in the heart of what they were dealing with. And also understanding and identifying and helping our kids understand in that process, even when things turn out great, even when people are lovely, even when there's a lot of forgiveness and moving forward on both sides, there's still a grief that kids can feel. And when I realized that you have experience in this, you know how to speak to this, I was so excited and just knew that we needed to have you on as a guest. So tell the listener your own experience in becoming a blended family. What was that like for you? What was the most surprising part of becoming a blended family for you?
So I became a blended family when my husband and I got married. This was 23 years ago. My son was a teenager. I had a daughter in just starting high school, one in middle school, and then Jim's daughters, one was in college and one was just about to graduate out of high school. And so a big span of ages and kids. And we came together as a family. The three older, believe it or not, even my son was already out of the house. My son at that time was really struggling with drug addiction. So he was going through a long period of recovery centers as he was trying to recover. So he actually left the house very young at 16. But still, we came together as a family in that very, very messy context. And it's not just that. I'm always transparent about my story. We started our relationship in an affair. And so my husband and I worked together. We ended up in an affair. I was divorced. He was married. And he was already working towards a divorce, hadn't done that. And we got together. So we started out 25,000 steps back on the front line of marriage. Okay. So way back there in a lot of turmoil, a lot of pain. And so when I talk about the sorrow, the hurt that we walk into a blended family, believe me, I've walked it. I've seen all of our children suffer. My son was suffering because he had experienced already at a young age the first divorce when he was only a little kid, and then a second divorce in his teenage years. Jim's daughters experiencing the loss of their family dynamics to the other women in that whole scenario, a very painful scenario. And my two daughters who didn't sign up for this wild ride, right? Just going along this whole thing. So this was a mess, like an epic mess. That's how we started. In a lot of pain, a lot of grief, a lot of anger, and of course, rightful anger for what happened. What we did was wrong. And it really did affect all of our children, including the kids, my kids. And so, yeah, I know the pain, but it's not unusual. Even a family that doesn't start the way that ours started will experience, they'll come into this blended context with pain. I remember a woman coming up to me, I spoke at an event, and she says, in order to be blended, something had to be broken. And I said, you're right. You're right. And a lot of times we don't take time to acknowledge that. I know when we started as a family, of course, we had a lot of shame. And it's really what brought me to faith is in the middle of all that, my now husband said, hey, we should go to church. And I thought, that's a really good idea. My life is a mess. I was not walking with Jesus. I was not in an active religious experience. And so we Googled churches, and every Sunday we went to a different church. And after a dozen churches or so that we walked out of because we felt the minute they hear our story, they're going to kick us out, we actually walked into a church where the pastor was starting to teach about a woman who met Jesus at the well. She had been married multiple times before and was living with a man who was not her husband. And I thought, okay, that maybe these people will accept us. And we stayed. And actually, which is crazy, 23 years later, I'm a pastor there. I mean, this is only God can do things like this.
That's amazing.
And he has healed our family in a way that's pretty remarkable. Yeah. And I don't take credit for that. I give him all the glory and all the credit for it. But I know what it's like to start way back in the deep hole and then trusting God to help us out of it.
I love how transparent.
It's a long answer.
No, it's so beautiful because your willingness to be transparent with the origin story of how this blended experience began. I mean, not only have we not talked a whole lot, and I feel so bad we haven't resourced and given more tools to families who are walking through this experience of becoming blended. But, oftentimes the stories we like to tell are, well, woman A got her heart broken by this man who wasn't worthy of her. And guy got his heart broken by this wife that wasn't worthy of him. And then they met each other at church at an event. And then their kid, we like to tell it from the sad story, but from the best case scenario.
Redemption story.
Yeah.
Yes,
and in your case,
we all love redemption stories.
Yeah. We were the ones. And I'm like, how beautiful the transparency and the transformation that you're able to clock, that you're able to give testimony to because of where you started. So in this drive to blend these families and in trying to gain insight into what that was going to mean, what did you notice first with your kids when it came to trying to bring them into family with Jim's kids? Did you feel there was resistance? Was there a sense of identity? No, I belong to my mom. I'm not going to be aligned in this way with this other guy and his stuff. Like, what was sort of the psychology in that moment?
Well, lots of stuff. So, and they, every child experiences in their own way. They have their own perspective of the experience. So a lot of times we like to talk about it as though, okay, this is what all our kids did. Well, every one of them did it differently.
Right.
So our oldest was extremely angry, and she cut us off for almost a year, and it was very painful and a really difficult process to reconcile. Our other daughter was like, okay, all right, this is the reality. I'm going to lean in. And while she was hurt and she expressed her pain and her loss, she still was leaning in towards building family. And honestly, that is her heart. She still does that today. She's about like, these are my people. I'm going to stick with my people. And so that's her. And then my son, he escaped into, just a total just despair, honestly, of like experiencing now all these men in his life, and where does he fit? So that was extremely painful for him. And then my younger daughters were just like, this is not my dad. I have my dad, and this is not my dad. And now they live in his home, and he has rules, and they did not like that. And they were like, why is he telling us what to do? He can't talk to us like that. And that was a whole process. So they were the only two living in the house, and they were experiencing that. Sometimes in blended families, you bring kids together in a house, and there's a lot of different dynamics going on. And that was our context. Yeah.
That's so fascinating. One of the things that you talk about, and this lines up a little bit when we were talking about with our puppy dogs from last year, but I think sometimes in these moments, it can be very difficult to recognize the grief that kids may be going through. And for the two partners who are getting married, who have this romance, who have found something that they are willing to push past previous pain in their life, previous relationship loss, whatever that has looked like, they're moving towards something that they feel holds tremendous promise and romance and love and potential for the future. Whereas for the kids, this can be a level of grief because this is not their ideal. This is not what they signed up for. When did you begin to realize in the various ways that these 5 kids were acting out, were letting their opinions be known about this relationship with Jim? When did you begin to clock it as, oh, there's a grief process going on here, that even though they even reacted differently, potentially some of the same dynamics were in play when it comes to thinking about grief and what it means to the kids in a scenario like this?
I wish I could say I knew it right away and I was super sensitive to it. And unfortunately, I can't say that. I was so self-absorbed and thinking about my own journey and the relationship and the joy that I had that related to that, and the shame. It was just a mixed bag of emotions that I was trying to deal with. And in a way, I wasn't as clear about what was happening to them, even though I was watching it happen. But I could say it took, I would say, at least a year or so into our relationship for me to start looking back and realizing, and it has been an evolving. I feel like every year I see more layers of like, oh, that's what that meant for you. So when I was writing this book, for example, I reflected back on our wedding photo. We got married, and Jim's daughters, both of them, showed up. And during the ceremony, they were crying. And I remember feeling sad about that at the moment, but now my heart is crushed. These teenage girls said, I'm going to be there for my dad. This is what he's doing. This is my father. I'm going to show up for him. But could you imagine the pain they were experiencing in that moment? Like everything this moment represented was not what they wanted. And so I wish I was a wiser woman back then. I was not. And I was more sensitive to what they needed. And they must have been they were crushed. Our younger daughters were numb. That's the best way I can describe it. Right? They're just going along with, okay, this is where we're headed. I remember my youngest, I was trying to explain to her that the divorce that happened between her dad and I was not her fault, and that I wanted to know how she felt. I literally said, how do you feel, honey? I just want you to know this is not, it's not because of you. This is obviously our faults, our actions. And she says, what does it matter? You're going to do it anyway. And she was 7 years old when she said that to me. And so I think it's a sense of like, I have no control over all these things that the parents are doing. And I'm just being dragged along in this experience. And now I'm going back and forth to different houses and having to deal with new people in my life, and just the amount of grief that I know I personally was out of touch with. and not willing to look at, and maybe not just being oblivious to, sadly, that I've had to over the years re-uncover and have that conversations. All our kids are now adults, and we've had a lot of really good conversations about this and found a great deal of healing about it. But it's been a journey because, oftentimes we don't see it.
Right. You've said too that as you've looked at how grief can intersect these places in ways that, again, might be impacting the kids, and for the parents and the parents who are about to become step parents, it's not quite as obvious. You've also seen it show up in a child that maybe somebody thinks is being defiant, is acting in a defiant way, or is resistant to certain things. And sometimes that can be a hard leap for us to connect the dots that, oh, yes, the behavior is defiant, but the driver behind it, the emotional driver, is a grief process. What connected those dots for you to help you see that in a new way?
So my son, like I said, he was struggling with how to cope with all of this at a teenage time when, they're already figuring out who they are, how they fit in. Well, now he's experienced this divorce. There's a new man in the house. Even though he ended up having to leave the house, I remember catching him, and I tell this story in my book. I caught him in the bathroom smoking marijuana, which obviously was not allowed in our home. I opened the door and I could smell it and see what he was doing. And I was like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Mom, what do you expect me to do? You're getting rid of all the men in your life and you're just replacing them. Maybe you'll replace me too." And right there, I saw the grief that was happening in his heart of all that he was experiencing and his inability to figure out where he fit. He went from being the oldest to suddenly being the middle child, all the stories about being the middle child, and, and just his displacement of how he fit into the family, or even what that meant about who he was, what was his identity in his own life and also in the context of family. And so that's an example of one place where I saw that. I remember with one of Jim's daughters, she straight out asked me, why are you marrying my dad? What do you want from him? And what she was saying is why would you do this? This was really painful to me. Was it worth it? What are you after? Just these conversations, which are very painful. And at the moment when you hear kids say things, you feel like they're attacking you and they're coming after you. And it's a bit shocking sometimes. But if you really pause and go, okay, that's coming from a place of pain and sorrow, maybe you can lean in a different way. I know I try to do that. I've learned to do that over time and ask questions and be curious and say, okay, what's behind that behavior that we can talk about and heal from.
Right. You bring up a dynamic that is really fascinating to consider. And I can remember a friend of mine talking about when they remarried, and they had been single for quite a while. And when he remarried, it, of course, seemed completely natural to him that his new wife would now ride in the passenger seat, in the front seat, the passenger seat when they would go somewhere. For his daughter, that was a demotion. That had been her seat because he'd been single for quite a while. She was the oldest, and that was her spot. And I think we sometimes can miss the natural organization of birth order from a family of origin and how that can get shuffled. So for your son, going from being the oldest to not being the oldest, that kind of thing. Looking back now, what kind of tools, what kind of approach do you wish you would have been able to have taken at that time to help all 5 kids understand their place, their role within the family that you were now building? And I think too about kids who, so in that situation, okay, your son becomes the middle child, but maybe with his dad, he's still in a different position depending on what dad's, new relationship might be, or other kids or whatever. So how do we do that thing where, we are asking a kid in many ways to change a role, to change a position within a family? What are the things you wish that you'd known that you could have helped with in that scenario?
Well, first of all, being aware. Probably the most important thing is being aware of how it was affecting him in a more intimate way and more intentional way so that he could feel seen in that change. He could feel heard and comforted. By the way, that's why I used the Beatitudes as the frame for my book. The second Beatitude is, blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. So this idea of we have to acknowledge the pain in order to then experience the comfort. And so I wish I would have been quicker, more compassionate, empathetic, better listener, more curious, to be able to understand what they were going through and be able to walk with them in it and not be so focused. Though I was thinking about my kids, don't get me wrong. I wasn't paying attention to them. The reality is I could have done more, I think, to help them feel seen and heard and understood.
You think that you are in the final round of getting all this parenting done. You've got kids who are in high school, you're starting to think about college, and you're thinking, this is it. I'm Julie Lyles Carr. I'm a podcaster, and I'm a mom of 8. And here's what I want you to know about George Fox University. It's a different way of doing college. Why? Because yes, it's all about getting a fantastic degree to set your kid up for their future. They have 60 undergrad programs available at George Fox University. But that's not where the story ends. It's also about equipping them spiritually. If you get out of college with a degree, but you don't have a closer relationship with God, that obviously is going to deeply impact what your young adult life looks like. So for your kiddos, I want you to consider, what would it mean for your child to be able to go to George Fox University, where 93% of George Fox students say they now have a closer relationship with Jesus? George Fox University is located in the Pacific Northwest in Oregon. They have 23 Division III athletic programs, and 100% of students at George Fox University receive financial aid. George Fox University is dedicated to their promise. They want every student to be known for who God created them to be. So listen, parents, yeah, you are getting into some of those final laps, but you definitely want to make these last laps count in a big way when it comes to the legacy of your parenting. So be sure and check out for your student, georgefox.edu. That's georgefox.edu.
One thing that you brought up when we first got to meet before we started recording that I thought was just exceptional is there may be somebody listening who says, well, my spouse and I are together in the first marriage and all the children involved are the children that we've had together, and we just don't have some of these dynamics at play. And what you brought up, which I went, oh, that is brilliant, is that, you give a family long enough, they hang around long enough, they will become a blended family. And here's what I mean by that. As you pointed out, if your kids get married, they're going to be bringing in a daughter-in-law, a son-in-law, and there's going to be extended family on that side, and dynamics and family traditions and holidays that shift because of those types of scenarios, the ones that can happen in the healthiest, most quote unquote intact family. There's going to come a point where you do become a blended family. Yeah. I mean, that's just,
and it's usually a shock.
Yes.
I have, again, we've been married 23 years. We've healed a great deal. Thank you, Jesus, and become a united family. I mean, if you saw us today, if you meet us, they don't even know we're blended until we tell them, which is really beautiful. It's wonderful. But what happens is a lot of families that have been together for the whole time, and suddenly a child gets married, they literally will come to us and go, okay, how did you do this? Because we are going out of our minds now. Our Christmas thing is completely messed up. And now we have to do this, or we're having issues with this one or that one. And now we've got multiple. An example might be if you have multiple children getting married, because you kind of okay, you adjust to the first one, if it's not a difficult experience. You have another child getting married, now you got another set of parents. And to give you an example, we have 2 daughters who are pregnant. They're about to have their babies here in May. And I had to have 2 baby showers. They wanted 2 separate baby showers because they have their in-laws to invite and all that. And they thought it'd be really weird to throw everyone together into one party. Fair. Right. So what happens is a lot of things change. And I remember my friends would come to me and go, how did you do this? And I think part of my desire with this book is to encourage blended families, whether they're as messy started as ours, or maybe they started with a beautiful, romantic, perfect story, but they're dealing with the messiness, is to understand that some of the experiences that we have had right from day one can be a blessing and instructive to every other family around them, and including those families who now they're unified, and all of a sudden they're not the little group they used to be. It's like, oh, the four of us used to go on vacations all the time together, and now there's more people and they can't come, or they want to do different things, and they're thrown off by the dynamic change in the family. So we can share what we've learned through our experience with others and help them. And I feel like we've done that. We've learned that, the blended family experience is something we eventually, for those who are blessed to be able to have children, they get married and have grandchildren and get some new in-laws coming in, and all the dynamics. I mean, that is a blessing, but it also comes with some challenges. And but we can work through them. We can find unity and beauty even in that.
I just love that you point that out, because it really does make everything that you've written about, that you're talking about, applicable however it ends up happening. And in our case, it's been very fascinating to watch. We have 8 children, and it's just from my husband and I. So we had not experienced really the blend until our kids started getting married. For me, for whatever reason, I've been pretty open-handed. Our home has been the kind of home where it's always the kids and their friends and lots of people calling me mama, and I'm responding and whatever. I'm wired that way, whatever. But it's been fascinating on us, because with some of the dating and all of that's happened, and people coming in and out of the house, and certain, levels of relationship, and then all the way to my in-law kids. A couple of my children, not in a bad way or a mean way at all, but they're very protective of the OGs, the original 10, the 8 kids, and then my husband and I. And they don't like it when somebody who doesn't yet truly have affiliation in their mind oversteps and calls me mama or something like that, even though it's being exampled all the time. But they have a few who they think that's okay for, and then ones that they don't think that's okay for. And I've had to learn, for their sense of security and knowing that I do not acknowledge and recognize that we have this, and then there's sort of this expanded notion of it, but to value that for them and to be thoughtful in making them realize, of course you are special because you're mine. I'm just trying to love other people that you like and love. And that's part of how I'm needing to show you, but I'm not showing you if it's crossing a line for you. I mean, you could call it jealousy, you could call it all kinds of things, but at the same time, I love that they are protective of our initial family unit. And I think that protectiveness can go too far sometimes with certain people. I think we do have to be open-handed with it. But I also appreciate that there probably should be a protection in place for what that original family is. So how do you balance that, being both open-handed with it, open enough that when your child shows up with someone and this is a serious relationship and it looks like they're going to get married, that you are not just shutting the door, or that's not what I expected, or I don't know if I like their interplay of personality and our family dynamic, all those kinds of things that can go down. But at the same time, open-handed enough, but also protective enough that you aren't compromising family life. Because one of my children said, I acknowledge that what we have as the OGs is unique. I don't want it to be messed up by somebody coming in and just taking too many liberties, which I thought was very interesting. So where is that balance in all of that?
Yes. Well, the first chapter of my book is Blessed are the poor in spirit, for there shall be the kingdom of God. And this idea is, blessed are those who understand that we need God. We need Jesus at the center of our family, because it is constantly evolving. It's a growing reality that our family changes and morphs. And even if you kept all the OGs together, they're going to mature into adults, and they're going to change, and they move, so it's sometimes we want to hold on to certain things and have it be like that forever. But recognizing that, no, we're actually growing constantly, that we're changing, and that's just part of life. And so we need God to help us in that journey of changes. We've experienced a lot of change. We have 5 children, like I said, married. two of them sadly have gone through divorce. So we've been through that experience with our children. Very painful to watch, especially when where we came from and we were hoping our kids could be like a new generation that experiences something different. Well, they've experienced divorce, and therefore there's new people who we loved who now are gone. We opened our hearts for, and now they're gone, and now there's a new person in. So you're a little like, I'm not sure I want to open my heart. There's a lot of emotions that go with that. So I can't give you a particular prescription. This is what you do. I can say that how we have managed through that is, first, understand that those who are saying, I want to protect this whole, are saying that has been so lovely, so wonderful for me. And as it changes, there's a sense of grief. Like there's a loss that's happening because it's changing, because someone's coming in, and acknowledging that reality, how wonderful, how sweet that is. And we want to protect it the best we can. But also we are a family that's growing with 8 children. My goodness, I can only imagine what your family picture is going to look like years from now, with all the in-laws and grandkids and all the different people coming into your life. That it's really going to grow and change so much. And just opening up their hearts to like the adventure of walking with God in that change, in that journey of growth. Everything that happens to us on this journey, God doesn't waste a thing. He uses it to form us, transform us. In my opinion, our family journey has been the most fruitful ground where God has discipled us to become like Jesus, because we've had to trust him with it. And then, acknowledging the loss, but also acknowledging that, hey, we're growing and changing, and we want to open our hearts to love others and be open to others. And it's very difficult sometimes to balance, right, with everyone. Someone's going to feel somehow left out, or it's so hard. And just opening up with our kids, I always tell them, I say, guys, I'm not going to get it right. I'm not going to get it perfect. Share with me where it hurts so that I can be there to adjust, or at least be present in your pain and comfort you. But yeah.
I love that.
I wish I had a better answer, Julie.
No, but it is part of it. And I have seen people, because they have not been aware that what they're feeling is a level of grief or loss, they tag it onto whoever the new player is who's coming into the game. Yeah. They're saying, well, this is not what I expected, or this is not the person I wanted for my child, or this is not. And hey, sometimes that mama intuition can be on, but sometimes it really has more to do with the fact that it's changing, that the core family is changing, and whoever that person would be who is coming into that dynamic and changing up the game, they were going to have a heavy load to lift anyway, because they are coming in a wash of a whole lot of different kinds of emotions. I think really what I hear you saying, Inez, is it's that awareness that we need to have, that when things change, when things are moving quickly, when a season that we've loved is coming to a close, that we just need to be really asking and seeking from God, okay, what is really the emotion that's going on here? If there's discernment I need to have, great. But before I just assume this is discernment, maybe I need to be aware of how I'm actually feeling. Well, tell the listener about the new book. I'm so excited for you, and where they can go find it, where they can find you online, all the stuff.
Yes. So the new book is called Blended and Blessed, Building Family Unity and Healing Through the Beatitudes. So every chapter, it's a short book intentionally so that it can be read quickly and often, because it's not something you just read once. These are Jesus's own words about what does it look like to flourish, to be blessed, to be happy. He wants us to be happy. He wants our families to flourish and to become salt and light to the world. And so every chapter deals with one of the Beatitudes and how to apply it to the family context. That's why we've been talking about a few of those even as we were together. So that book can be found on Amazon, but it also can be found on our website called blendedandblessedbook.com, because there you can buy bulk sets of them. It's a book meant to be given as a gift to families who are blended or becoming blended. There are few books out there that have kind of like this bigger theological framework for how to view the family and how to find peace and unity through the work of Jesus Christ in their lives. So I hope it's a blessing to your community and they can take advantage of that. And I'll give you all the links so you can put them on the show notes.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I just so appreciate that you have tackled this topic with such transparency about your own life, what it has looked like, that you've given us some great parameters in which to think through things a little bit differently, not to just think about a kid who's going through a hard time with a family transition as being in defiance, but rather processing grief, what it means that even if our nuclear family stays intact, there's still going to be a time that it's going to become blended, most likely, if we onboard some in-laws and some grandkids and all of that. It's just so helpful in today's society where we do have a lot of stuff that talks about the health of the nuclear family, and I'm grateful for it. And yet we know that family life is far more complicated. Jesus's family life was far more complicated.
Yes.
So thank you so much for wading into these
Thank you.
waters and sharing such a beautiful piece of yourself and what that you've learned. I really appreciate it, Inés.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you for having me. It's been a blessing.
Absolutely. Okay, friend, go to those show notes. Rebecca's going to have links and all the things where you can find Blended and Blessed, and you can find out more about Inés. And I love it too when you come over and hang out with me. I'm usually on Instagram, Julie Lyles Carr over there, AllMomDoes.com. Incredible community. Go check it out on all the socials and at the website. Women just like you, looking for all the same kind of answers, inspiration, encouragement. I know that you're going to find some incredible things there. Would you grab this link and send it to someone in your life who you know is going through a season of trying to blend family, whether that is through a new marriage or whether that is bringing in-laws into the family, whatever that looks like. I know that this is something that's going to be such a great resource for them. And I will see you next time on the All Mom Does podcast.